yours truly, Robert Pete Edwards, and my co-host on today is Ed Narain. As you know, school is back in, colleges are back in, parents are writing checks, cash apps, everything like that for the kids to go back to school. You gotta feed them, clothe them, all that kind of good stuff. And Ed, I know that'll be coming up soon for you, my brother.
Oh, it's sooner than that, man. It
Uh,
started this week.
All right, Clint is up on the hill this week, and we want everybody to understand that In Touch News, you got to listen to us. We People listen to us all over the world. We have varied opinions. That's why we call it straight up the middle. But sometimes people always ask it, do y'all really disagree a lot on everything? No. That's why they have something called compromise. That's why they have something called consensus. That's why they have something called coalition. That's why they have something called cooperation and things like that. All those big C words, Ed. And sometimes I think the black community forget that that's a part of us too. If you think about it, every time and it brings me to tears sometimes, and yes, men do cry. Every time I think about the coalition that was put together during the civil rights movement, it was a coalition. It was a diverse coalition within primarily the black community, the Jewish community, a lot of Southern white people who stayed in the background but wrote a check, as you know. It was a
Yep.
coalition of different people, a lot of rich people, but primarily made of blue collar people and things like that that made a difference. And so, as we here in 2021, a lot of that is fragile. A lot of it has disappeared and all. But there's each day you live, you have an opportunity to make a difference, and that's what we need to think about. Each day is a work day for us, and I think you never stop working. I've never stopped working. A lot of people have never stopped working because there's work to do. So with that in mind, we got some topics today, Ed, and I can tell you before we get into it, because I want you to hit this first one straight up. I want to remind everybody that school is in. Look, there's a purpose for school zones. They put the new light in Tampa on 26th Street, Ed, and MLK.
Mhm.
And I want to thank, I guess they forgot to listen to it in the paper or list his name in the paper, but I want to thank my old radio partner, Al Lee, and in particular Frank Reddick, who started the whole movement about getting that light there. I mean, a lot of people laughed at him about that at the time, but that light should have been there exactly 10 years ago. But I'm going through that the other day, and I pull over to the side, and I'm looking at young mothers and young dads speeding in a school
Yeah.
zone. That doesn't make sense for me. If you go from Nebraska and MLK all the way up to uh, 40th Street, you got kindergartens in there, you got nurseries, you got 5 schools in that area, you got uh, 3 bus zones that making stops in those areas, and yet not only did what was really interesting at not only did I see people speeding, but look, if you want to smoke your herb in the morning, that's fine. That's up to you. Okay? But to show off with it, with your kids in the car, rolling the window down, blowing smoke out and all, where our young people can see that between 7:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and then you get mad if the police pull you over. I would have the paddy wagon there. I mean, you want to get high, that's your thing. But I think it sends a bad message to our folks. And when you look at what the opiate crisis is doing to the black community now,
Mhm.
that's really in there now, and more young people, young mothers carrying around dead babies in the trunk, and that kind of stuff. There's a mental health issue, and there's a real urgent drug abuse issue among our young women and stuff. And how long are we going to continue to ignore that? Because the more we ignore it, the worse it's going to get. And
Well,
so,
Pete,
you know,
let me stop you there this morning and just say, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be the replacement, the
okay,
co-host with you this morning for Clint. I think Clint is up there at the on the seventh of the highest hills, trying to figure out. which dorm room he's supposed to be dropping his child off to. He's got 2 children now in Tallahassee, which is pretty incredible. And kudos to him and his wife, Samantha, for the great job they've done in raising their kids. But we would be remiss if we didn't take a moment to talk about a guest that we have coming onto the show today that is waiting with us, that is going to answer and solve all of the problems that we have going on in the state of Florida, including the opioid crisis, the speeding through the school zones, COVID. I couldn't do this by myself. So I invited my good friend, the future of Florida, as I refer to her in private conversations, the state representative for District 63, the leader designate, double D, right, of the Florida House Democratic Caucus. Representative Fentrice Driskell is here with us this morning as well.
So y'all done it up on me? Is that it?
Hey man, sometimes I gotta go get reinforcements every once in a while. This is one of those times. Okay. Good morning, Fentrice.
Good morning, Ed, and good morning, Pete. Thank you both so much for having me here. And pretty much, Pete, just know when Ed told me that I'd be on the same platform as you, it was an automatic yes.
Well, I'm gonna give you a pass because you were supposed to do an op-ed piece, if you recall, on a juvenile issue, and you were gonna look into that further. For the benefit of our community, but you got tied up and all. So it was the first time I asked you to look into a couple of those things. And I have not been a legislator, but I've been in a lot of political and other kind of meetings, and you do get tied up. So I'm going to grant you forgiveness on that. But I think as you move forward, you're paving a way to reconnect middle class and low income people with upper black middle class. We have to do that. And I think you have opportunities if you choose to do so in sincerity, because I've seen a lot of elected officials, black and white, after a point they don't really do that. And that's what hurts the coalition and consensus, to get our people moving, for an example, to learn how to vote even more stronger during off-year election. To back you even more as you try to make some adjustments and add on to the Criminal Justice Reform Act and all. So I wanna remind you, like I remind myself, and Ed has reminded himself, and we remind each other, that at the end of the day, we have to find a way to make a difference to make our community stronger. Whether somebody's on welfare or whether somebody is an entrepreneur or they brag about all the money they think they're going to take with them when they put them in the ground, that kind of foolishness. But so I've observed your work. I'm pleased with most of it. There's some I think could be made improvements on. But you know what, Fenton? All of us can make improvements. That's why each day we live, there's an opportunity to do better, to strengthen our coalition, and to take not only constructive criticism, but also give out praise to those people who are in the trenches that are not normally recognized like they should, that strengthen you and I, and actually made a difference in how we think positively and doing what's right for our community. You think I'm on to something with that with you as I give you a break?
No, thank you for that so much. And I remember that conversation. And it wasn't that I forgot that op-ed. I decided not to write it and probably should have circled back with you about that. Okay. But I continued to work on that issue behind the scenes because it was an important one, where some of our youth were under the threat of being held in secure facilities, even though they weren't caught up in the juvenile justice system. They were in the DCF system. And it was this whole big thing about how could we best care for those kids. And I never stopped working on the issue, meeting with the secretaries of DCF, the Department of Juvenile Corrections, as well as our Eckerd Connects team here locally, and trying to push to find a solution. And even so far, went to see if there could be a legislative solution in giving the courts the authority that they would need to commit these young people to programs when they're out there on their own and they don't have. But that's a whole other conversation that we can have. But in terms of, do I think you're onto something? You are absolutely onto something, Pete, because what you're talking about is community. You're talking about the ties that bind. You're talking about us being able to look into a brother or sister's eyes and understand that, yes, we are our brother's keeper. Yes, we are our sister's keeper. In learning that, I know I always get the quote a little wrong, but MLK used to talk about it. We'll either learn to live together as brothers and sisters and as a community, or we will perish as fools. And if there's one thing that COVID to me should have taught us is that we are so in this together. We are absolutely in this together. We're literally at a situation in our lives right now, in our communities, where our own individual health also depends on the actions and choices of the person that's, next to us and what they decide to do. So we have got to get it together, and we need to get it together as a community, because we are stronger together. I've seen it in my own lifetime at times where our community, or even I'll just put it in the context of the Florida legislature, when the Florida Legislative Black Caucus decides to get together and hunker down and work together, we accomplish far more than we would if we were working on our own individual agendas. So yes, sir, I do believe that you are onto something. I'm with you on that.
Ed, I talked to somebody that you were coming on today, and Fentrice can take you off the hook, but you can answer this question. And she brought it up about the caucus and all. Even with the campaign on COVID and all, if you look at the small black newspapers across the state of Florida, whether it's the Miami Times, the Weekly Challenger, Capital Outlook, whatever, the Florida Sentinel, whatever, I noticed there's not a concentrated effort, at least in public relations wise, of black leaders, including the Black Caucus, through photos or op-ed pieces or whatever, pushing for more of our folks to get the COVID shots and all. Can you explain to me, at the end of the day, we need each other. So can y'all explain to me, and it's been historically like that, why the Black Caucus leadership, in my mind, is so reluctant to really use the power, particularly in situations like this. I read newspapers every day all over the country, but I have not seen them push like I think they could push to get people to trust us and them to get the COVID shot. I turn over the law and let y'all deal with that.
So, I'll say this as a former Black Caucus chair. It is very hard to wrangle 27 different personalities that represent different parts of the state, right, with different communities that are slightly disparate in terms of what their needs are, to get on the same page on almost anything. So what Fentrice and the Black Caucus was able to do this last legislative session on criminal justice reform, for example, was a huge accomplishment, because they were able to get some significant concessions that hadn't been done before. I mean, everything from no longer arresting children under the age of 7 to actually creating a database for arrests. And Fentrice, you can get a little bit deeper on this issue should you choose to. But when I look at COVID, here's the thing we have to remember. This issue itself is the responsibility of the respective governors to ensure that the message is getting out to the people about getting the vaccination. So when I look at what Gwen Myers, for example, has done locally, and Diane Hart here locally in terms of encouraging the community to get vaccinated, that's been done on a grassroots level. When you mention print media, you have to remember the age group that's not getting vaccinated, 19 to 45, they're not reading the Florida Sentinel Bulletin, unfortunately. So you have to figure out a different way to get them to understand that this is important. Now, as far as I'm concerned, watching your friends die, because we've seen that people in their 30s dying from this thing, should be enough. But unfortunately, it hasn't been. But it is very difficult to get elected officials of any type on the same page. Unfortunately, it's even harder when it comes down to our African-American constituency. What do you think, Fentrice?
You know what? I really like that suggestion. Pete and I when I was first on his show, and I remember one time he said, "Why doesn't the Black Caucus do anything?" And I was like, "What you talking about, Pete? We raise all this money for scholarships. Who else is raising as much as we do?" But when it came to COVID-19, we actually never stopped meeting. So usually what happens is you have your legislative session, and then everybody kind of has a summer break. The Florida Legislative Black Caucus, when we ended session in March 2020, we never stopped meeting. We kept meeting. We kept pushing the governor for better information. We kept pushing for vaccine locations. Back then it was testing locations in our communities. And then we pushed for vaccine pop-ups in our communities. So most members of the Florida Legislative Black Caucus held those. And then we also did a 4-part series online, streamed it across all streaming platforms that dispelled myths about the vaccine. And it was very, very good. And it included representatives not only from pharmaceutical companies, but also Black doctors, as well as the gentleman whose last name is escaping me, please forgive me, but he was the head of UF Health. He just passed away, unfortunately. A Black doctor who was leading that very large health system, and he was one of our experts. And then locally, we had Dr. Kevin Sneed on multiple events online trying to push that information. But so I pushed back on that to say that we didn't do anything. Then we rolled right into session in the midst of handling all these unemployment claims and things that people were calling in with. But now that the Delta variant is resurging, I actually kind of like that idea of op-ed. So I will take that back to the Florida Legislative Black Caucus Board.
One thing I like to suggest before we move on to some of the other topics, I go around all over the city and the county, see young people gather at clubs the whole bit. With the talent that we have among young people and the Florida Legislative Black Caucus and some other talent that we have in the community, I think we could do a PR campaign that is tailored to them, whether you put a hip-hop or rap version to it or whatever, with photos and all, a mixture of age groups. And you have to pass it out to the clubs and the whole bit. And you got to go where they're going, whether it's Rolette Park or whether they're going to the place, Whiskey Joe's or whatever the case on the weekend. And I think that type of exposure with people of color, if it's done right. So people say, well, how you do it? Well, the Black Legislative Caucus, like a lot of other caucuses and all, they have companies and all that always trying to lobby them, and they have public relations campaigns and all. And I like to say, hey, we could put polite pressure on them and say, okay, you want us to look at this issue and all. Why don't you, as a win-win with us, once we properly screen the company and what they're trying to do, is put out this notice of appeal to our young people and all. And Ed, you remember when I was on the other show, I talked about if we had to go into the clubs or even the strip clubs to get our kids, young people to vote, we go in there and say, okay, can you vote before you sign up to vote before you buy the Casamigo overpriced at the club? You figure me out? And I think what I find out with that, young people, if you do that in sincerity, you know what? They'll take the time and register to vote. I think they'll take the time to give a second thought at COVID. But that's how we reach them. We know we're not going to reach them in the churches and all, so we got to go where they're at, and we got to put it in a theme-oriented thing, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, or whatever, to catch their attention and reflect the numbers. And those when we do that on all issues, I think we'll benefit. And Fentrice, as you in your leadership role, I like to just suggest something to you and Ed, regardless of party affiliation, that we do that with this off-year election. I talk to people old and young. They're not even thinking about the off-year election and how important it is for the country to come back together and all. So that's something I like to suggest to you all, because y'all have more influence with those companies than I do. But I think that's how we flush out whether these companies are sincere in bringing this country back together and doing the things that they need to do to help the black community get stronger. And that includes also black companies, Ed, that have made tremendous amount of money off of these contracts and all, but you would never know it because they don't really advertise job openings in our community, and they don't even advertise as a thank you back for the community rallying behind them to get a percentage contract or whatever, and say, here's the numbers because of the community effort, young or old, that I was able to get this contract, and we hired so many brothers and sisters. So it's that kind of stuff that we need to clean up internally in our community first before we attack the big issue, because divided we do fall.
Yeah. So Pete, let me push back on you a little bit though. I hear you talking about the need for elected officials to get out there and be influencers, but again, when you look at the age group that's refusing to get vaccinated, okay, and we need to be very specific and careful about language, right? It's a vaccination, something that all Americans have had to have. It's been required for you to go to school. It's been required for you to go to college. Proof of vaccination. Now, I understand why some people may be skeptical for health reasons, but we've seen with this recent surge of COVID cases in Florida, 155,000 people have contracted COVID in the last 30 days. That is excuse me, not 30, 7 days in the state, which is our all-time weekly high since this pandemic started. So I don't think it's a matter of people not being aware that they could go get a vaccination shot for free, mind you. It's people just don't want to do it. So I don't know if an op-ed makes the change. I don't know if an elected official standing up at City Hall saying, "Hey, get the vaccination" is going to make a difference.
No, you get out on the street. You get out on the street.
But here's the thing: there's groups like Reach Up, and you're very familiar with them, that partnered with Kevin Snead, and they went out into the streets. They went into the community and got people vaccinated. People's mothers are telling their children to get vaccinated because they're concerned about their grandchildren. So at this point, I guess is the argument I'm making. This isn't an information thing. People are well aware of the vaccination being available. People are choosing not to get it. Those who have religious exemptions, it's understood. Those who have health concerns, I would encourage them to talk to their doctors, especially the immune compromised, because they will realize it's better for them to have this shot than to not have it. But there are legitimate reasons why people don't want to do it. I'm not talking about those folks. I'm talking about the ones who were like, yo, my immune system is good. I don't have it. I'm not going to get it. Matter of fact, I'm just going to keep drinking my ginseng tea and my sea moss every morning, and I'm going to be good. Those are the people that I'm concerned about. I don't know how we can't reach them. I don't know how we reach them is what I should be saying.
Fentrice, let me ask you something. You're out there. You have a unique way that young people are beginning to buy into you. Now, some of them they're from parents who incomes are higher than normal. I get that. But you're doing something that attracting young people to buy in to you when you're out, because you're not always out in formal settings. I've seen, and I've always I get around and I ask people who trust me to give an honest opinion. So there's something that you're doing that is beginning to pull particularly young women who may not be in the upper middle class, but they're learning as you get out there more. What is the technique that you're using to get them to open up and trust? Now, they're not going to agree with everything because they don't trust politicians, whether Republicans or Democrats. Okay, I get it. None of that. But there's something that you have come on to that is beginning to make a difference. It's like the seeds are being planted and they're beginning to come up. Can you explain to the audience on Straight Up the Middle what happened? How were you able to connect?
Well, thanks, Pete. So part of the way I think that, at least for me, that I try to connect, and understanding that in my district, it's pretty evenly divided. It trends a little bluer, but it's kind of evenly divided. And so for me, I am someone who really tries to make sure that I leave campaigning in its proper place and I have governing in its proper place. And I understand the distinction between the two. Once I'm elected, campaign season's over, I'm required to govern. And that means that I have to represent everybody in my district, even including those who may not agree with me or I may not agree with them. I have to put the best interests of the people, and always keeping it front of mind, and always keeping the interests of the state front of mind. And from my perspective, we really just have to focus on connecting to people as people, finding that common link of humanity. You don't talk down to people, and you also, you don't get intimidated by people just because they have a different walk of life from you. You try to share your experiences and see where you can connect, and then build bridges from there. To Ed's point about, the young people who are, especially it's the young people who are refusing to get vaccinated. I do want to say though, to me, it seems like the minute that we politicized this vaccine, it was over. The minute that it became a rallying cry, saying, that we don't want the vaccine, don't wear a mask, and tying it to freedom. To me, that was such a disservice to the public, because this really is a public health issue. And so now you have people who I think talk very boldly about they don't want to get the vaccine, but sometimes I wonder if it's fear. I wonder if people are afraid because of the misinformation that's being spread around. And that I do lay at the feet of the politicians who've been in charge. whether you're looking at the governor or you're looking at, the leadership, our former president. I think it was such a disservice to the people because it's a novel virus. We're learning about it day by day. We've got health officials doing the best that they can. And now you look at the end result where you have so many hospitals here in Florida and just throughout, especially throughout the Southeast, that are at capacity. I heard a report today about a hospital in Nashville that is actually refusing people because they don't have any more ICU beds. And it just has such dire consequences. And you can't, you got to leave campaigning where it is. And then you have to be able to govern, but some people don't seem to be able to switch between the two as appropriate.
That's
So
Ed, that's a good one for you. We got about 3 minutes. I'm going to let you handle that before we go on the break, because when we come back, as we get the census results in and redistricting and all, the question I want to ask both of you when we come back is, how do we distinguish the difference between politicking and governing as we try to get our people lined up to understand the significance of redistricting? So Ed, finish this out, and Anna's going to give me the signal when we go on break, and then that'll be the issue when we come back on Straight Up the Middle. Go ahead, Ed.
So part of the issue is something that the founding fathers said many years ago. I think it was Benjamin Franklin. I don't know exactly whom, but I remember when the quote was basically, "Uneducated populace is a danger to the republic," and that's where we are. I personally feel that there is one party that wants their constituents to be as uninformed as possible and just simply take for truth whatever an elected official says. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. We need to teach civic education again, and we need to really double down on people understanding how government is supposed to work. We saw last week where the governor basically said he was going to stop the salaries, prevent people on local school boards from being able to receive their salary for doing their job. And there were thousands of people that said, "Oh, that's a great idea. We can stop these mask mandates." Well, guess what? It's unconstitutional. That's not within the powers of the governor. But people don't realize that because they're not properly educated on civics, which is why we saw in 2016 and the abuses of powers that followed for the next 4 years. Unless we start to educate people on how government is supposed to work, when people elected officials decide to get political, they won't be able to tell the difference because they're simply going to follow the personality that's sitting in that office. So we need to continue to elect people like Fentrice who have integrity, who are highly educated, and who are willing to take the time to talk to low people on the totem pole like you and me to help get the message out about what's really happening in our government. So I think that's where you have to start. I think that's where things get better, by making sure our children understand the role of government in their lives. Asking someone to wear a mask is not an infringement on their freedom. Just like restaurants, private businesses have the right to say, "Hey, no shirt, no shoes, no service." The same can be done for masks, and government has it within its ability, well within its rights, to ask people to wear a mask in the government space when they're there. All of this individual freedom nonsense is just that.
All right, before we go to break, we were doing pretty good until you said it's only one party. Now, look.
I didn't say it was only one party.
Okay, I want to make sure that our listening audience know that both parties play politics. And within the parties, there are several divisions. And so we need to understand that, because if it was a little different, we wouldn't have so many people going to non-party affiliation, that kind of stuff. So I wasn't going to let you get away with that. As we
it's a concerted effort, though, Pete. On one side, but I mean, you literally have a quote that came out of the report this week where the former president said, "Hey, leave it up to me and the GOP congressmen. Just say that something's wrong and we'll figure out how to challenge the election results." That's nonsense. And so I'm not saying everybody's innocent. Yeah. I'm just saying it's been obvious that one side has been very complicit in the last 4 years with purposefully misleading the American people for their own political benefit. And that's wrong.
Let's go to
Straight up the middle.
Straight up the middle and Pretty Moon, or whatever that song I like. She's not going to play that today, but we're going to break. When we come back, Fenton Driskell will tackle where do we really stand on redistricting, because I got a tough question for y'all when I come back. When we come back, straight up the middle. My Lord, I'm behaving on a Saturday morning. Yeah, I was scared of the storm. All right, let's go to break. We'll be right back.
playing your favorite old school. Today's R&B. With a smooth touch of jazz. You're listening to In Touch Radio.
You've been injured. You deserve help from an attorney that knows how to handle your injury claim. This is Attorney Clinton Paris from the Law Office of Clinton Paris. For over a decade, I worked for insurance companies, and now I use that knowledge and experience to help people that have been injured. For a free consultation, call me, Attorney Clinton Paris, at 813-413-7924. That's 813-413-7924, or at parislawoffice.com. At the Law Office of Clinton Paris, we take the pain out of being hurt. Offices, Riverview.
When it comes to reality radio, everyone is a star.
Shining star for you to see what your life can truly be.
On your smooth soul and R&B station. On the World Wide Web. In Touch Radio.
Straight up the middle on a cloudy Saturday morning here in Tampa Bay, the city of Tampa. With the new census data out, the country is supposedly becoming more diverse and all. They changed something that talked about whether you're biracial or the whole bit. But as the redistricting approaches, where they change all the maps and all of that, I want to ask Fentrice, what in districts that have a low percentage of African American voters, a low percentage of Hispanic voters, or within a Hispanic voting population, a division of voters based on the color of the Hispanic, so to speak. How do you get them to buy in that even with redistricting, the crossover vote is just as important? Once the new districts come out, and you may have, your district may change, or Ed's old district may change, or something like that. How do you, what's the approach that you take that, not the Melissa Snavely approach, that, I mean, we'll talk about that at another time, but what approach do you take to let people know that even if they're in the minority in your district, that all of the people in your district are important to you? And I'll let you and Ed deal with that for a minute, if you don't mind. Are you there?
Apologies, I was muted. You think over a year into the to the pandemic, I would know when to mute and when to unmute. Apologies for that. So you're right. So we finally got the data. It was delayed because of the pandemic. And now it is actually going to be a scramble, I believe, that you will see to get these lines drawn. By now, it's my understanding in the process, we would have already been on a road show around the state, hearing from people in very direct ways about proposed maps and what it is that they want to see. So I think things might look a little different this time around, but it doesn't mean that it should diminish the type of outreach that we need to do, or the amount of outreach that we need to do to the community, because I think people need to know and understand that so much of, how can I put this? When I talk to my constituents, right? When I go out to town halls, I had one a couple weeks ago in New Tampa. And at that town hall, you had Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And yeah, there were some questions about some very partisan issues, but for the most part, you know what people cared about? They cared about our schools, what type of education our kids can get. They cared about water and the environment. They're concerned about clean water. They're concerned about processed or refined toilet water and sewage water being injected into the aquifer. They were concerned about the economy and jobs. In other words, they were concerned about issues that are not that partisan. But what was interesting to me, when on some of those issues, I had to explain to them why things are the way that they are, and why I, as a member of the minority party, am not necessarily going to be able to get them everything that they want because of the way things are. And Florida's legislature is so dominant by the Republican Party right now. They were kind of astonished, and especially those who tended to lean a little more conservatively. And so I think what we have to communicate to the people is redistricting is our chance to give everybody a fair shot. It's our chance to level the playing field when it comes to how these district lines are drawn. And so that we can diminish the effect and impact of gerrymandering and really have a government at the state level, and then our congressional districts too, that we draw, that are reflective of the community's values. And what I'm finding, and I believe that this actually is true on a whole with the entire state of Florida, because if you look at us, we're pretty evenly divided when it comes in to voter registration across the parties. And so, we have this populace who I think wants us to legislate from a more moderate place, a more centrist place, but we have a legislature that doesn't do that. And please understand me when I say, I think when it's too far one way or the other, it's just out of balance and not entirely reflective of the people. So I think we have to communicate to the public that redistricting is going to be your best shot for us to have, a legislature that is more reflective of everybody's values, so we can get these big things done that you want done.
Tough question for Ed. Stop right there. I got a tough question. I got away from all my tough questions the last year, but I'm coming back to them. So, Ed, would it be reasonable to say that as a state senator, you would not be hesitant in meeting with your constituents to call out other people who in your, let's say, local delegation, they may be more of a hindrance than a help? Would that be politically suicide, or would you have the courage to do that?
So that's an interesting question, but I'd like to think that my service and my record of service in the past reflected that I was willing to say what people knew was right, but maybe was uncomfortable saying, which is a part of the reason why I'm not elected today, because the other side saw me as a potential problem and not somebody they could just say, hey, don't say this, or please stay quiet on this issue, because I didn't play that. I was there to represent people. And I'm, like I still do today, I'm going to speak out when something is wrong. I mean, last year during the Floyd murder, I felt that our city had taken the wrong path in terms of how we address protesters. And I went down and I spoke a very uncomfortable truth to our city council. And I did the same thing at a rally that Representative Driskell and I both were a part of, and right there with the police chief in front of us. So I've never been afraid to say what's right. What I found is there are plenty of people that are thinking what I'm thinking, but don't have the platform to say it. So as long as God has got air in my body, I'm going to always speak that truth, because I got to be able to sleep at night. So when I think about redistricting, this is something we just went through in 2016, because in 2012, the powers that be that were able to draw the line had been proven in court that they were again trying to draw lines to their advantage. So it wasn't until 4 years later that we were able to get those lines certified by the Supreme Court. And even some of the local districts here, Congressional District 14 comes to mind, Senate District 19 comes to mind. Those lines had to be drawn by the Supreme Court because the legislature couldn't do it. Here's where we need to be, Pete. We need an independent commission in this state that draws the lines based off of the data. It is a political process that the powers that be, whoever is in charge, because Democrats did this when they were in charge, they're always going to draw lines to their advantage, to that respective party. And so the trick is this, and this is where African Americans have to be very careful, because you have to have minority access districts under the Voting Rights Act. I'll just call out a party. I don't like to do this when I do these shows, but the Republican Party that's in charge in Florida have basically said to Black legislators, don't worry, we're going to protect your districts. And they pack more African Americans in districts rather than to make them a little bit more democratic, to protect their advantage in other places. So while we want to have African Americans elected up and down the ballot, we also need to be mindful of the fact that oftentimes these seats are packed to the advantage of one party. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. And I love what the representative said. There's supposed to be an open process. But if we're going to throw all our cards on the table, it's been smoke and mirrors for a very long time. They do have the public meetings. People say what they want to say on it. But those maps get drawn by about 4 people. And they're presented, they're ratified, and then boom, they're put into place. Numbers be damned.
Well, let's talk about that, Fentrice. You all know that's going in. I'm a Republican, conservative Republican. I know we got extreme right-wing Republicans like we got extreme left-wing Democrats. I get it. At the end of the day, we still have to get a consensus to make it a difference in our county or whatever the case may be. Now, in this redistricting process, number one, it's always been take care of me first, regardless of, like Ed said, what party is in play. Number two, most people have no idea the significant changes of redistricting, what it's all about anyway, because regardless of, even if I'm black and I live in another district, I'm going to look at Fenton Driskell or Diane Hart as my representative rather than Jackie Toledo or somebody else. That's going to happen. People do that all the time. Hispanics do that. So how do we, with these changes coming up, how do we basically make sure that, hey, even if it's within our own Hillsborough County delegation, if they're trying to jerk us around, how do we expose that and at the same time try to have a united front as a legislative delegation? Or is that possible?
I do think it's possible. I think that the greatest accountability when you're talking about politicians, it has to come from the people, though, right? Like it's one thing for me to say in a private conversation to a colleague of mine, hey, what you're doing is wrong. It's a very different thing for that colleague to have constituents who are aware of the issue that's going on, because that's where you really get the accountability. So I guess what we're talking about at this point is both transparency and then also making sure that the public's very aware so that we can hear your voices, because that is who a politician is going to respond to the most. I always say that there's nothing that a politician is more afraid of than an educated voter who's not afraid to use their vote. And I fundamentally believe and know that that is true. And so if we can get this information out to the people and make sure that the people are watching, then I think we can have greater success. But you're right. So to me, though, that really is the hurdle. How do we get people to pay attention? Because people are busy in their lives. Back to school just started. We got a whole pandemic. So we're going to have to think through some creative ways to try to get this information out and get people to pay attention.
Well, Pete, you just said something earlier that I want to stop on and talk about. You know, redistricting is a local issue as well. So your commission seats, your city council seats, your school board seats are going to be redrawn. And this week we saw where our school board, instead of really tackling the issue of masks and COVID, talked about critical race theory at the school board K through 12 level. What is going on in Hillsborough County? What's happening, Pete?
Well, here's the thing. All of the parties have different factions within the party. That's why I said more people are going independent party. I was disappointed by Snavely's comments, but I was not surprised. What was the most insulting thing to me when she said her constituents? When you look at her district, she has a significant amount of black people in that East Hillsborough County district. I mean, Plant City is not in Fentrice district. You know what I'm saying? So it sends a message, and this is where the voters in that district, and we have to educate them regardless of who they are, that say, hey, look, you got a school board member, regardless of what her views on CRT or critical race theory or whatever, she is saying basically her constituency asked her to do this, and implying, and it's obviously, you can read right through it, the constituency she's talking about is only the white people in her district. Now, as a Republican, regardless of that, I'm insulted by that, because that sends a message to say, hey, all white people are racist, all black people going to vote Democratic. I don't even go out to the black community. And what it proves, not only I've seen it in a school board district, I've seen it in some of the legislative districts that handle South Tampa, the whole bit. We got elected officials that can be so narrow-minded that they only look at the people that think like them. And the controversy over Snavely's comments at the school board meeting is kind of like Anthony Sabatini. You know, he's a Republican, but I wouldn't vote for that guy because he carries an extreme right-wing point of view.
But I guess what I'm asking, is like, where does this issue on a subject that's not even taught K through 12, why is this seeping into our local politics? I mean, Representative Driskell serves with, I hate to even call him Representative Sabatini, because I feel like he's disgraced the office with his comments. And talk to us, Representative. I mean, you're seeing that more on the state level and the national level, but to see it on the local level, I mean, what's happening?
So I'll tell you. Peter, you jumping in or
No,
am I jumping
I'm
in?
saying it's there locally. Go ahead, Fentrice.
Thanks. Yeah, here's why this was so disappointing to me this week. Okay, we have kids going back to school. You have parents who are afraid, children who are afraid. I have a niece who just started her first year, or excuse me, her last year of high school. So she had her first day of her last year of high school this week over in Polk County. She was only one of two kids in her first period class wearing a mask. None of the teachers were wearing masks. She's afraid. Gratefully, she's been able to get the vaccine. But then I think about those kids who are 12 or younger than 12, not able to get the vaccine. And so people just also want the freedom to send their kids to school and know that they're going to be safe. So in the midst of us dealing with all of that, in the midst of our school board and our county dealing with financial challenges, we had a school board member who chose to bring a resolution about CRT when it's already banned from being taught K through 12 in Florida. I just want to make that extraordinarily clear. And it's a topic that keeps coming up. I've had it come up in town halls, and I'm always very quick to try to give the public the information so that they know anytime that they see something come up about this, it's just a red herring. It's just people playing politics. And that's what I talk about, Pete, when I go back to that comment about the difference between campaigning and governing. And while your points are so well taken, when you govern, you have to represent everybody in your district. And you can't take such a myopic view that you're just catering to one element of that district. And that's what we saw happen with the school board. So I was very disappointed in it. And I hope that parents paid attention to that and that they remember that when it comes time to next election season, and make sure that they are electing officials who actually represent their values and who are willing to put the important issues first rather than just trying to score political points, because that's what that was.
Yeah, it was wrong. You won't get a sincere apology out of it. But keep in mind, from a political standpoint, she's getting ready to run for another office. So you gin up your base right then and there to help with fundraising and all like that. And that happens across the political spectrum, Ed. You know that. So you do that. It was an insult to good white people, black people in that Plant City or rural East County area, and all. But you take enough political science classes, you can see it coming. So we have to deal with that. Now, as we had some other topics, Ed, that we wanted to talk about today, but I like to skip those. I like for you all to give an idea from a citizen's point of view and from a political standpoint. What y'all dropped off the screen, I think. Fentrice, you dropped. Oh,
no, I'm here.
She's here with us.
Right,
but Pete, let me say this. I know Fentrice has a hard stop here in the next 2 minutes. So you and I can talk about these last couple of issues that you have tuned up. But before she leaves, we always see Fentrice in a very professional way. She always has all the nice, just professionally put together, educated answers to these questions. And I have an opportunity as a friend in a public space to ask her some personal questions. And I wanted to do that before she left, because she's going to leave here in the next 2 minutes. Can I do that, Pete?
Yeah, because I'm going to get her on another op-ed piece if she doesn't follow through the next time. Trust me.
Uh-oh. All right, so Fentrice, real quick. Before you have to go, we want people to know who you are on a personal level. We know we're going to vote for you. Like I said, you're the future. But I want to know some personal stuff. Yeah. All right? Because this is going to decide whether or not I'm going to support you. Tell me about your first job. What was your first job?
So first of all, I'm going to tell y'all, I actually love to work. So I had many jobs. My junior year of high school, no joke, I had like 5 jobs. But my hair was always done. My nails were always done. And I loved it. But my first job was actually at Lady Foot Locker at the Lakeland Square Mall.
All right. So you were a sneakerhead. Tell me about your favorite hip-hop group.
Oh, that's tough. I'll just tell you my favorite. So if it's a group, it's a Tribe Called Quest. If we're talking artists, it's pop.
Okay. What celebrity have you been confused for in the past?
Really none, but there was a time, it was really weird. There was a time where I had multiple people tell me that I reminded them of Cameron Diaz because of the way that she smiles. Our smiles are similar, so.
Okay. Prince or Michael Jackson? Choose wisely.
That's not even right.
I'm just saying, we want to know. The voters want to know.
Michael.
Oh, my gosh. All right. A glass of wine or a shot of bourbon?
One.
The Wire or Power?
The Wire.
Teddy Pendergrass or Marvin Gaye?
Also not right, but I'm going to go with Marvin.
And
All-inclusive resort or a cruise?
What'd you say? I missed.
I was saying a resort or a cruise?
I love both equally.
Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock?
Also, what in the world are these questions? This is horrible.
This is a Chamber of Commerce interview. Come on.
I know. So, and that's hard.
Well,
I'm gonna pass.
I'm gonna go Dave.
All right. I'm gonna let you off. This is the last question. You're from Polk County. You're a Lakeland girl. Do you put sugar in your grits or not?
Oh, don't even try me with that. No, we don't put sugar in the grits.
All right, I got
what in the world?
One question for you.
Now I'm gonna be honest though. So my mom is from North Carolina. And their Southern Black folk, it's a little different there. So they will put sugar in grits.
Yeah.
And they do eat cream of wheat. That's not my bag though. For me, it is savory, salt, pepper all day.
See, these are the important policy questions, Pete.
Well, I got a question from an important hood brother social status. 6 foot or not?
You asking is 6 foot or better?
Oh, okay. Well, all right. I said from a hood social point of view.
Lord.
See, and the reason why I brought that up because I want people to understand that while we have individual roles to play in government or business or education or whatever, we're still people.
Right.
We're still people. Yeah. And she was part of a group of ladies, I believe called the 6 footers or whatever, that did some wonderful things and all. And people assume that they were 6 foot above everybody else and formal status, but they were down to earth. They still down to earth. So
can I chime in?
Absolutely.
I actually never had the honor of being a 6 footer. I was just friends with all of them. Okay. But because I'm so tall as well, people would associate me with that group, and it's an honor because they are such great ladies. But I'll just tell a real quick story because Ed's right, and I never think about it this way because like Ed and I are friends, so he knows my personality and that I'm probably one of the most funny people he's ever met. But anyway, last session we had a get together. Someone had a get together at their house, and next thing you know, music is playing and somebody's DJing and they wobble and whatever. And so I jump in and dance, and one of my colleagues turned to me and was like, I didn't know you loved to dance. I'm like, are you kidding me? I love to dance. Mm-hmm. And so I just appreciate these questions for allowing me to show a little bit more personality because the public doesn't know. We don't, I don't get to interact with everybody every day. So
well, I want to say thank you because I know you got to drop. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your Saturday morning to spend a little time with Straight Up the Middle. I know I'm not Clint Paris. I like to think I'm better looking, but thanks again, Representative Leader Designate. We are super proud of you here in Tampa. Great things are ahead for you. I tell people all the time, you are the future of Florida. So I know we've got your back, and I look forward to the great things that you're going to accomplish here.
And as we close out, Ed, I appreciate her being on. I keep it real, person. I mean, I call it like I see it. I don't care if you're my sister. I'm going to call it like I see it. And Fentrice, I'm looking forward to more things from you. I feel comfortable that if I see something or note something with you, you're going to look at it this time a little bit more openly because I think we got to get our team of community members together. So, Ed, as we close out, I'm going to let you say the final word as we straight up the middle here. I got double team today, but look, folks, in our community, it's not double teaming as much as it is teamwork to make a difference to me. Because I think we got.
I'm sorry, Pete.
Yeah, so I'm looking from behind. So let you close it out, Ed, rather than me singing to Fentrice this morning. So go ahead.
Well, we got a little bit of time, so we can still argue a little bit more if you'd like to.
We got okay. No, all right. As we go forward, question for you: Can we make a difference in holding? Well, I got a question for you because I heard it that she's going to be at Fair Oaks for a senior citizen meeting, Kathy Castor, for 1 hour. I can't believe it. Only 1 hour on Monday, 10 to 11. Sounds like a photo op. Can I ask you something? Why Black Democratic officials are afraid to hold white Democratic officials, whether it's congressmen or whatever, accountable when they only hang around for photo ops and perform. I just
well,
want to
wait,
keep
wait,
it
wait,
real
wait,
with
wait,
you. I
wait,
just
wait.
want to keep it
All
real
right.
with you.
That's definitely a perception in your opinion. I'm going to say
Not
this.
mine. Not mine.
No, well, listen, here's the thing. I've always said this when I was elected. The constituents, especially African-American voters, citizens, they come to their Black representative and say, I need you to do this. And oftentimes we forget about everybody else that's sitting on that board or that council or in that legislature. And I've always reminded people, I'm Black just like you. I deal with the same struggles that you have dealt with. My family members do as well. I said, so I'm always going to be your advocate. But if I'm on city council, I need 4 votes. I'm just one. You got to go get the other 3. If I'm in the legislature, you need 60 more votes to make this happen. And so it's not just about holding white elected officials accountable. It's about holding all of them, regardless of the D or the R next to their name, accountable. Because we have Black electeds that say one thing when they run and do something totally different when they get elected. So it's not white or Black.
Don't I know that?
It's about accountability. But like you said, Pete, I think the community as itself, and when I say the community today, I'm talking about the Black community. We need to continue to educate ourselves on the political process and understand that just because there's an issue out there that elected officials make a decision on doesn't mean we can't influence that through our actions and through our words and through our advocacy. We've got the anti-maskers and maskers out there strong, but they're a vocal minority. They don't represent the will of most of the people. But elected officials cave to them because they at least take the time to come down to the meeting to speak, to write the letters, and do the things that get their attention. And so for the Black community to actually achieve any type of political wins, we have to become better advocates. We have to get involved.
I couldn't have said it better. That's teamwork. Look out for the kids this week. Don't forget In Touch
100%.
In Touch Radio. We look forward to seeing you and hearing from you next week. We're live all the time, Anna. I may have to get a shave next week. But anyway, Ed, I'll see you. My Democrat, not a Republican I'm trying to recruit. So we go.
Hey, I'm God's child. Party.
All right. Put on some music, Anna, and we're going to get out of here. Drive careful, folks. A lot of rain in the Bay Area today. And pick up your In Touch newspaper all over the place. I was in a laundromat yesterday, in a beauty shop the other day, and I'm like, oh, my God, I need to stick around more, okay? All right. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.